Hello and welcome again to my lab exhibition. In this section, I'm going to be looking more in depth into some important security concepts. I'm going to be starting off with MFA, multi-factor authentication. I'm going to be looking at how to configure it for the entire tenant, how to configure fraud alerts, among other things. And then we'll look at other section of other security concepts, other security policies that you can configure to make your ecosystem secure. So basically, there are multiple ways to deploy multi-factor authentication. But I'm going to talk about the configuration, the settings from the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. So you come to protection, and here you have multi-factor authentication. Now, something we have to keep in mind is multi-factor authentication is best used in conjunction with conditional access policies. But we'll talk more about conditional access policies a bit later in the video. For now, let's focus on multi-factor authentication. Now with multi-factor authentication, we can see on the page, you can see configurations that you can perform. Now coming to the first one, account lockout. Basically, you can configure the number of multi-factor authentication denials to trigger an account lockout. So this is basically like a brute force scenario whereby someone else is trying to access their account and then they are doing the multi-factor authentication behind the actual user's back. So you can specify how many numbers of trials they have before it gets locked out, and then you specify the number of minutes that the account is locked out for, and then the number of minutes that it's automatically unblocked. Basically, these two are usually of the same amount. When you specify here, it is usually the same number here. But that is that. You save it, and now you can come to your blocked and unblocked users. If you have a user blocked, you can review them here and then you can unblock them. And also you can configure fraud alerts. I'll come back to how to configure fraud alerts in a moment. But you can also configure notification. That is a notification whereby every multi-factor authentication error or something like that is going to be notified. So you can set that to the user admin or to the global admin. You specify the email. So this is OAuth token. OAuth token is basically like a FIDO2 token key, something similar. So it has a security key, a secret key that can be configured. So instead of the users using SMS or any of that, they can use this token to verify. It is a physical token. There's also the software version, but this is the hardware version. So basically, you click upload and then you have a CSV file of the users and the token that is assigned to each user. So it is saved in the directory. And then you can also specify phone call settings. That's the phone number that is going to show when a call is being placed to give the OTP code to the user. And then number of pins per attempt per call, you can also specify that. Also, you can specify providers, but that has been disabled, so not anymore. So you can configure server settings. So basically, if you set up an entire server to represent your your multi-factor authentication, then you can configure some settings here. And also there is something we call one-time bypass. This is very important because sometimes a user can be in a scenario whereby they don't have their phone or they don't have one of the authentication method that they have enrolled for. So you can grant them um, like just like a just-in-time access, JIT access. So you give it to them for 30 minutes and the system will not require them to do a multi-factor authentication. But this you have to use at discretion. You need to be sure that the user is not under duress or it is actually the user, and then you give them a just-in-time access and then they do that. And then you can also configure the caching rule. So one moment waiting for that to load. So yeah, you can configure the caching rule. That means after the first multi-factor authentication, the server caches the authentication keys and all of that. So the next consecutive authentication will not require two-step verification. So that's all you can do here. Now to assign multi-factor authentication, you come to your users, and then the same way we did in the previous video, by user, you click on the user you want, and then you enable multi-factor authentication. You click enable, and just like that, you have configured multi-factor authentication. Now, when you click on the user, you can come to the specific user multi-factor authentication setting, and apply some other settings. And here you have the server settings that we were talking about earlier. If you have trusted IPs that you want to skip multi-factor authentication for, you can configure them. If you want to remember multi-factor authentication, you can also configure that. And then allows user to create a password to sign into non-browser app. All of these settings are things that you can play around depending on your environment, and then you save it. So just like that, you configure multi-factor authentication. So speaking about fraud alerts, you come to you can do this from the Microsoft Azure page or from the Entra admin center. So I'm just going to do it from here. You come to security, you click on multi-factor authentication under management, and then here you have fraud alert. So basically it allows your user to report a fraud when they receive two-step verification request that they did not initiate. This is really good when your users are security conscious, when they're properly educated about security measures. So once they receive a phone call that requests them to do multi-factor authentication, they can report it. So you click that to on, and for best security measure, once an account like that is identified, it is best to block that account so you can investigate it and then bring the account back into the save mode. So automatically block the user who reports fraud. You put that to on, and here you put a code, a number. So the number you put here, the user has to press this number and then press the hash key or the pound key, and then automatically it will trigger an account block. The account is going to be blocked, and then the admin, user admin, security admin, global admin is going to be notified about uh, the fraud alert, and then they can investigate and remediate. So you can put this as 0, you can put it at 1, any number you want, and then you save it. So next time when the user receives a multi-factor authentication request that they did not initiate, they can simply press the 0 and pound key, and automatically the alert is triggered. The account is temporarily blocked until an admin unblocks it. So if a user is blocked, the admin simply comes to block/unblocked users, and here they are going to have the currently blocked user, and it's going to give the reason why their account is blocked. You could say something like fraud alert or unauthorized multi-factor authentication request. It's going to specify the reason, the date, and then the action. You can either unblock or leave the account blocked until you're done with your investigation. So configuring one-time bypass, also we're just gonna go through it. When the user contacts the admin one way or the other that they are unable to access because they can't complete one of the multi-factor authentication settings, you simply come to the section, you click on add, then you specify the name of the user, you set this is 5 minutes, you can increase it up to 800 seconds, and then you put the justification, which in this case is a lost phone, and then you do OK. And this is just one time. If the user misses, the time window, then it will not work again. Or let's say the user uses it and then they could not complete the verification within the time frame, or um, 30 seconds later they logged out or something happens and they need to do multi-factor authentication again, this will no longer be valid. You would need to reset a new one. So basically that's how it works. So now we'll be talking about conditional access. You remember I said multi-factor authentication are best used with conditional access. So conditional access is basically an if and what scenario. That is, if this happens, then this is what the result should be. So for example, if someone wants to access the Microsoft Azure portal, then request multi-factor authentication. So it's if then scenario. So to configure a conditional access policy, we come to security, we click on conditional access, and here we click create new policy. There are also templates that you can choose from, require for admin security and all of that, but no, we want to create our own conditional access policy. So you click on it, create a new one, and here we're going to name it okay. So assignments, you can choose the users or groups that you want to include or exclude. So in this case, for selected users and group, you're going to choose which one. Is it guest or external users only? Is it for directory roles or is it for users and groups? You select, and here you specify which users and group you want to create it for. So these are the users in the domain. So let's create it for um, let's see this group. So everybody in this group, the conditional access policy will apply to them. Now that that is selected, you selected the target resource, that is what you want the conditional access to block, so to say. So select resources. If you wanted to use specific attributes, you can, create an attribute for that, but no, we don't want that. And here you can choose the app that you want. So Microsoft Admins Portal or something like that. So it includes Microsoft 365 and all of that. If that's what you want, you choose it and then you go select. You can choose multiple ones and then you come to the condition and you choose if you have configured user rigs, sign-in rigs, insider rigs, depending on what you want and what the risk level could be. You can specify that, but we are not configuring that in this video. And then you click on grant. So grant access, and then you choose either require multi-factor authentication or require authentication strength, require device to be marked as compliant. You can choose multiple options, but in this case, we just want the multi-factor authentication. And then when you scroll down here, you see for multiple controls, require all selected control, require one of the selected control. That is, if you choose multiple options, you can specify how that works. You go select, and then you can choose the session and any of that if you want. And here you can choose either to report only, that is, it is not really enforcing. It will only give you notifications if something like this is about to happen, or you can put it on. Once you put it on, you go create. So my security default is still on. So I have to turn off security default for the entire directory or for that specific group. You can also configure network and all of that, and then you click create. And so your conditional access policy that works with multi-factor authentication, when a user wants to access the admin's portal, is going to be created.